Cool. Welcome everybody. Happy sprint, end of sprint 22. Happy Friday. We are here to demo sprint 22, which is fleet version 4.49, codename Titanium. And to kick us off, oh, by the way, this is in dog food. We just deployed to dog food, so anything you're seeing today, you can go play with in dog food right away. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Sharon and Endpoint Ops for features.
Thank you, Luke. Endpoint Ops team was dealing with a lot of aspects of our product this sprint. We were literally all over the place, starting with adding new visible features like just an example showing the percentage of failing policies and other stuff. And also things under the hood, like we diversified our source of vulnerability information. Team will present this. We are actually taking in addition to NVD, we are taking things from VulnCheck, which is really under the hood. Also under the hood, corrections to the calendar feature. We describe it as bugs, but it's actually improvements of dealing with bad scenarios like rate limiting of times or other webhook abilities. And without further ado, I'll let the team present it. We'll start with Rachel and Victor. Rachel, Victor, who wants to start?
I think I'm going to go over some of the UI changes, and then Victor's gonna add on anything else that I have missed.
Thank you.
Cool. So sorry, I felt like I was prepared for this demo, but I realized I needed like all sorts of different hosts in different states to really show off what we added. But here are two new features that Victor and I worked on together. The first feature is this little OS query information that you can find on the host details page. It is now dynamic. So if there is a Fleet D version or an Orbit version, you'll also see those that detail here instead. So right now, this host is just one of these VMs, and it just has OS query on it, so we can see that version. I'm going to go ahead and show my personal computer. And you can see here, it doesn't say OS query anymore. It's going to say agent. And if you hover over this agent version, you're going to see OS query. It's actually my Orbit version, and you can see my OS query version here. And if my computer has Fleet Desktop on it or Fleet D on it, you would also see the Fleet D version on here as well. So that's the first major thing is Victor made sure we had all of this extra information being grabbed from the host and added to the host details API. The second thing that we added together was if you go to this actions dropdown, you will see different run, script, lock, unlock, and wipe as options that MDM has added onto our dropdown. And if you are unable to do this because your scripts are disabled, and we are certain that your scripts are disabled, you will have a little tooltip next to it. And that's the thing that I was like, oh crap, I don't have one that has it disabled. So if you wanted to, you can go to the PR for that to see what it looks like in the Figma. And yeah, also if your host is offline, we reinstated the whole offline, what do you call it? Tooltip as well. So here's a host that's offline. If I hover over query, you'll see this offline message. So same thing with these three is if you have your scripts disabled, you'll see a tooltip about it being disabled, and that's why you can't actually click on them. And yeah, Victor, anything you want to add?
Yeah. I was just going to add, I guess that's a question for product. Just realized the example you're showing, the run script lock and wipe,
Yeah,
would probably be disabled as well.
I think in this case, it's set to null, and product decided yesterday that if it's set to null, they can still click on it, even if it might not work. They were
What happens
wary.
if you click?
I
Sorry to
don't,
interrupt you, Rachel.
oh, I really don't know. It says no scripts are available for this host because I don't have any
Got
script. So
Okay.
We want folks to be able to queue up a lock
even if the host is offline. So that when it comes back online, it gets locked.
Well, my point specifically for this example is this is OS query only, does not have orbit.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So is
All
that
right, well, now you can think about this. I'll continue. I'm going to share my screen.
okay? Awesome.
So this information is coming from the Orbit info table. So Orbit now adds, we add the desktop version column here. In that table, it gathers the desktop version from the desktop executable. And we also have the scripts enabled here, which is an integer, one if enabled, 0 if disabled. And this can dynamically change because we have profiles, MDM profiles that can change this. And just wanted to show when you run the host details query, you get a bunch of stuff. So these fields are now present. We have Orbit version there, Fleet desktop version, scripts enabled. And just to show, this one has Fleet desktop version, so you can see it here in the tooltip. Okay, back to you, Sharon.
Okay, thank you. And next we'll have Lucas. Lucas would show several abilities, several new abilities like a table, the ability to add labels to host, and also sometime we invested in making our life easier, or releasing fleetd easier. Take it, Lucas.
All right, hi everyone. So I'll start with the API endpoint. I believe maybe the MDM team will demo some of this. They added the ability to, let me just go here, the ability to create a manual label. So Fleet has two types of labels, manual, which are like the labels and like that are used throughout other apps and that you can set on hosts manually. And then we have dynamic labels. Dynamic labels means they have a query, right? So all of these platforms are calculated with a dynamic label. And if you go to add label, I believe probably the MDM team will demo this part. But again, you have two types. The API that we added here is for manual labels, right? So going to demo that. And what we basically added is a way to add a host to a manual label, just like a host to multiple or one manual labels. And this is part of an effort to, I believe we have a Figma link with the flow. All right, I don't think we have it here, but there's an effort to use this as part of a webhook. So if you integrate with Okta and you are a member of some groups in Okta, then you can move your host to a specific label. So let me demo that. I have a sample label, manual labels here. And we'll create a label using FleetCTL called manual label toolbar. Apply. You can do this via the UI, but I'll leave that to the MDM team. So it applied a label, currently empty. So if we go back to hosts, you will see that there is an empty label, right? And then the way we added a new API, maybe we'll add it to the UI, but there's a new API called host ID label, where you set the host and then the label names, a list of label names. In this case, we want to add the manual label toolbar. And host ID 1 is my host here that I'm using. So if we do that, it returns out 200. Let me see if that works. All right, it added the host to the label, and the same thing we wanted to a way to delete. So if your host is removed from some Okta group or something, you can instruct Fleet to remove the label from that host by just using the delete API, and that's it. You can also delete. It will, if you delete again, returns 200. And there are a few things like, for example, you cannot really set all hosts. All host is a dynamic label. I think we use that maybe when running live queries, you can select all hosts. You can't really do this because it's a dynamic label. This API is only, it's only allowed on manual labels. All right, that's it on the label part. Again, the MDM team will probably add more to this. All right, I spent a bunch of the sprint automating how we release FleetD. Like a couple of years ago, it used to be super hard to release FleetD because it's a manual process. And I'm going to explain in a second why it was a manual process. But now we invested time, which I think will pay off, because whenever we want to release FleetD, it should take no more than 20 minutes. Because of like, you have to synchronize the repository, but that's about it. And then some GitHub actions. But again, it should be fully automated. And I'm going to demo. No, I'm not going to demo that because we can't really release right now to the repository. But just to explain how this works in a nutshell, we added this releaser script, right? It's just a bash script, similar to the other script we have for releasing Fleet, right? The difference here is that we have a few other items here to think about. So to release FleetD, you have to have sign-in keys that are authorized. Because actually this is super important. This is when you release FleetD, you're releasing it to every endpoint of every customer. So it's a big deal. So security is paramount here. We store the encrypted signing keys. Again, the signing keys are encrypted. We store them on a USB flash drive that we keep somewhere safe, offline. We only plug it in when releasing. And then we store the actual, the passphrases to decrypt these keys on 1Password. So this is sort of a 2FA authentication, because if somebody were to steal my USB flash drive or Zach's USB flash drive, they cannot really use the keys because they're encrypted and the passphrase is a 1Password, and vice versa. If they get a hold of 1Password, they cannot do much because we have the encrypted keys elsewhere. So then the script will automate reading from the USB flash drive and then getting the passphrases from 1Password using the 1Password clean. So this all used to be manual, so it was very error prone and very tedious. Then we had to releasing FleetD means building Orbit and Fleet Desktop mostly. And we use GitHub Actions to do that. The reason we use GitHub Actions is because of signing and authorization. We have to sign and authorize Orbit. So we just, this script will trigger a GitHub action, wait for it to complete, and then download whatever was built. And lastly, it has to push the actual components to AWS. And that means that's basically tough.fleetcdl.com. This is an S3 bucket open to everyone on Earth. And we have everything here. All right, so again, I'm not going to demo this. There's a video that I'll paste on the comments with me doing this. It takes 10 minutes. There's a lot of setup that you have to do, obviously, to get this up and running, but it's way simpler than it was before. Again, I'm super excited about this, and I will probably add more people to the list of people that can release FleetD because it's going to be simpler now and more secure, actually. So, all right. And lastly, it's done. Lastly, I have this other issue that actually Zach implemented, Zach Wasserman. We added these tables that I think are, very dummy tables, but they're really useful. We added them to FleetD. So I will just quickly demo these tables. They are already released. Actually, will be released today. To stable later today. So if we go to queries, So we usually have to do some gymnastics to parse JSON files, but now we have a parse JSON table. So in this sample, I'm using parse JSON to parse my VS Code settings and checking if this user has auto update set to false. We could make this a policy, and then we can use certain features to enforce this. But again, we added this table. Let me just run it on here, and the table just returns every field, every JSON field is in this case as well. Just let me do that real quick. So again, it lists every key. The same we added for JSON lines. So JSON lines is, I believe it's just JSON documents, just like appended one to the other. Some tools do that, and I found that we do that on. So this is the JSON file now parsed, and then we added JSON lines, and I see that I'm adding here, gonna parse the fleet OS query status file, which is just JSONs one after the other, just as for demo purposes. While that's happening, lastly, parse XML. I think it's also useful. Okay, yeah, this is like, I think you're gonna have, these numbers are probably the line. Again, super useful. And parse XML, I'm just gonna parse my plist file, I think, Orbit plist file. And lastly, we added ini, which is also used by applications to store configuration, and that should be it. So these 4 tables are part of FleetD now. All right, that's about it on my end.
Thank you, Luca.
Again, this was implemented by Zach Wasserman. I'm just demoing. That's all.
Zach is great. And for everyone that enjoyed what Lucas presented on the automation, I just want to remind everyone, first, there is a longer version and much more fun in our training videos section. And this training video section is growing very thick, and it's recommended for new engineers, customer success engineers. Just type training videos in your Google Drive and you'll get there. Hopefully it's well organized, but lots of contents there. Thank you again, Lucas, and I'll get it Rachel, back to you for some more features.
Yeah. All right, so these are quick ones, but I just want to preface this with these are 2 things that I filed way back when, like 1200s, and this was nice features because it was things that I felt like were some friction points, and I was able to work with products with the help of Rachel, the other Rachel, and design it myself on Figma and iterate on it and get some things in and get it approved and build it and test it. And so it was nice to work cross team. But it's 2 small things. If you're on a host that is queryable, meaning they're online, we now have this little bit of cleanup here. So this used to have like this big purple button that screamed in your face, but it's more of like looking like our policies stuff. And this initially was going to be to only show queries that can run on your hosts, but for the sake of iteration, we cleaned up this first. So hopefully we can get that design in a future sprint. And then also if you go to policies and you go to add a policy, before you couldn't really filter what policies you're looking at here. This is actually a list of 40 policies we might want to actually add to them, because while doing this, I realized we hadn't added to them in like over a year. So now you're able to use this drop down to look for a policy by platform, which is better for the user experience. Like if I was looking at my Windows host, I can click on Windows and it'll make it a lot easier for our users to do it that way. And like I said, we should be adding some more here because we only have 2 that are related to Linux. And while doing this, we found out we have none related to our Chrome OS tables. So we might want to add those there as well. But yeah, it was great to work on this on all fronts.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Next, we have Jacob.
Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. So share my screen. So actually, let's see. Should be on dog food. This was just a nice convenience, kind of general policy health feature for users. Let's see. We have on the workstations. So if we run a live policy, let's say just workstation, we should see let's stop it early. Pass and fail percent. And at least in this sample here of the fleet workstations, we're 100% passing this policy. So hooray.
Thank you, Jacob. And last for the features and features will stuff will be team talking about how we diversified and improved our sources of vulnerability information and some another thing. Team, take it.
Hey. So speaking of device health, let's see. Can everybody see dog food over here? Thumbs up. Awesome. I'm going to pick on Alex here. Made some improvements to the health API. See, so I'm going to do this demo on dog food. We got 911, got host 911 here. So you'll see some new stuff in here requested by customers. We have now we have a new failing policies count as well as a failing critical policies count. In addition, we added some more data here within the failing policies object, whether the policy is critical and the resolution steps. So that's some customer requested information, I believe, for some zero trust functionality. So happy to support that use case. Moving on. Let's get into to this stuff. I like to talk about vulnerabilities. And I also like I guess I also like 90s SNL and drawing pictures. So I'm going to show a lot of pictures today. Here's a fleet server. We're going to do a bit of a recap on vulnerability management. So from a very high level, very familiar slides if you saw maybe some past slides. Fleet does a very, very good job of ingesting and detecting software and operating system versions on hosts. We use that information and we pair it with a bunch of vulnerability data that we gather from various sources. Right? Here's kind of our main sources. NVD being kind of the big cloud here, and that's because it's our largest source. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So some bad things happen in NVD land recently, February in particular. Here's an article from Info Security magazine last month saying there was the NVD saw disruption. It specifically sees CVE enrichment on hold. So you may be asking, what is CVE enrichment? So here's some sample data. This is directly from some abridged data, directly from the NVD feed. So we have CVE identifiers. Everyone should be familiar with that. We have some metadata. In particular, check out vuln status is analyzed. That means it's been processed by the NVD. And one of their processing steps, their enrichment steps, is to create these software matching rules. And we use this to match fleet software to vulnerabilities. And so in this case, we're matching the earlier versions of Chrome to this vulnerability. And that's good, right? That works for us. Here is what we've been seeing as of late in the last month or two. The CV does exist in the feed. If you notice in the metadata, we have awaiting analysis. And kind of the biggest red flag here is, oh, we don't have any software matching rules. So that should cause some concern for anyone using Fleet and the NVD data in general. I'm gonna read this out because I think it's a good summary from the Vulners blog just this week. Since February 12th, the NVD added more than 7,000 vulnerabilities. Only just over 400 of those were enriched with crucial information. And what we care about is CPE. That is what they're referring to as our kind of our matching logic that we use. And you see kind of the graphs kind of level off there, where there's a lot of kind of pending or a lot of CVEs awaiting analysis. And what does this mean for Fleet customers? It means we can't detect those vulnerabilities, right? So before we declare the end of vulnerability management as we know it, there's some hope. VulnCheck, and more recently, as early as this week, a company called Vulners, both have started enriching their feeds. VulnCheck in particular provides a NVD feed that they enrich with their own data. And so we're going to kind of looking at this NVD again. So what are we going to do as of next release, this upcoming release? We're going to add VulnCheck data. In particular, we're going to add missing matching data that VulnCheck provides into our NVD data that Fleet grabs. So you may be wondering, what do I need to do to get this new data? Do I need to open up firewall ports, proxies to VulnCheck? No, we don't need to do that. But before we get to that, I'm going to kind of talk about at least the NVD API. So when you set up a new Fleet instance and you have vulnerability management on, first thing it needs to do is grab all the data that NVD has. This takes about 17 minutes, and that might not seem like a long time to some of you, but in development, that is an eternity. For new customers trying out Fleet for the first time, that's a very long time to wait to get value from Fleet if you're looking for vulnerability data. Compound that with 17 minutes is really kind of best case scenario, what we found. The NVD API has been somewhat unreliable, so we have a fair amount of retries that happen, and that really kind of bump up that 17-minute time. So going back to this kind of original slide, this isn't completely accurate. That's a bit of a summary. What Fleet looks like today looks more like something like this. So Fleet servers grab information from NVD, and we have a Fleet managed GitHub repo that aggregates and pulls vulnerability data from other sources, and that's how it's used today. GitHub has I think we want to build upon the success and reliability of the GitHub platform and API, and so things are going to look like this at a high level. And so customers should not need to open up new firewalls, proxies. They should already have existing communication with GitHub. Granted, this is another repo, so I want to point that out. We're using 2 repos to grab this data, but one source, one place to get all the things. And so we're talking about sync time. What does this do to our initial sync time? It brings it down like quite a bit. The data is already there. It's already pre-processed. It's already enriched. It's just grab the new data. So what's the impact? As of yesterday, this is very, very dynamic. As of yesterday, we've seen over 5,000 new matching rules. So that's, I think, a welcome change to folks looking for worried that they're not worried that vulnerability scanning isn't getting as much as it should. I'm gonna have the quickest demo on earth because it's not the sexiest demo, but we're gonna go to Fleet. This is in dog food, by the way. Thank you for deploying that before demo day. Because I found this. Here's a CVE. If I look up the CVE in NVD, it is awaiting analysis. So NVD, just some proof that NVD does not have the information we need. So, but we matched it anyway. Thank you, VulnCheck. Just to show a little bit of contrast on what it would look like for an older CVE. I'll go down to the bottom here. Here's what the matching data looks like. And that's it for me. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, team. And this is it's a small step for the vulnerability, but a big step for Fleet DM company. I think we are more diverse now, and that's something that definitely our customers will be happy to hear. That concludes the part of the features. I'll return it to you, Luke, and we'll get back with improvements and bug fixes.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim, great demo. Always setting a high bar for for demos. So thank you. That was rad. And to point out, as Tim kind of alluded to, used to be every Fleet server was doing a lot of processing, pulling down the GitHub data and the NVD data. Now we're doing that processing once as part of our GitHub workflow, hosting that in GitHub, and then all the servers can pull it from there. So overall, saving a lot of processing and time across the board for all Fleet users. Really excited to get that out. And over to George for MDM.
All right, getting us started off is Gabe, showing you what you've seen a little bit before with Lucas, but taking a deep dive on manual labels in the UI.
Hey guys, share my screen real quick. Yeah, so I'm going to be showing what Lucas was mentioning as far as the manual labels in the UI. So if you go to add label from the host page, this will take you to a new UI page for adding different types of labels. You can see we have dynamic and manual. The current labels are all dynamic. The new type of label is this manual label. So manual labels are for if you have a couple of hosts that you're specifically thinking about. You don't need to run a SQL query to get them. You know exactly which ones you want. You can use this sort of label to target those hosts. So for example, let's say I have a couple hosts that require some additional security considerations, I guess. I can go in here, label those as a high security. I can choose this host in particular. I know I want to have these settings. This is a high security group. And I'm going to save this. So this will create a new label with the hosts I selected. And the reason this is useful is, like I said, if you want to label it, if you want to group them for your different sort of use cases, this could be one use case here is that you can go in for the high security group. I want to upload a profile. I can target those specific hosts through this label here, and those hosts will get this profile that I'm going to upload. So this is just one use case of manual labels. It works the similar with the current labels is that I can also see the hosts related to those. I can go in here and edit the labels, and you'll see the hosts that you've selected. You can add new hosts after the fact too. So I'll just add this host, and now this host is associated with this label that I created. And yeah, that's it as far as manual labels in the UI. Is there any questions?
I did want to also point out that manual labels have been available with Fleet Control Apply, but this is now making them even easier to access with the UI.
I love this feature. This is my favorite new feature.
Alrighty, and now I've got a small video to share. Make sure I also share sound. Of Martin's work. This was both Martin and Sarah for OS updates.
All right, so I'm going to show you how the new OS updates are delivered via DDM, declarative profiles for macOS Sonoma, so macOS 14 plus. I have a VM with Sonoma running, and it's already enrolled in Fleet with MDM. It already has the Fleet D configuration installed, the profile for Fleet D configuration, but there's nothing else. So if I go in controls here, you'll see that there's no OS updates specified yet, so it doesn't have any declarations waiting to be installed. So if I look in the database at MDM Apple declarations, you'll see it's empty. And the same thing for whatever is pending to be deployed on that host. There's nothing there. Okay, what else? Do I want to show you something else first? No, I don't think so. Okay, so let's go ahead and set a minimum version. I'm not really sure what the valid versions are for macOS, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to say 14.4.0 and set this sorry, to some date in the future. So I save this, and now it should have created the declaration, and it will be pending deployment on the host. Meanwhile, we can take a look here in the OS settings, so the summaries of profiles installed on hosts. You can see that it didn't move anything to pending for that. Oops, what happened there? I'm not sure. It didn't make any host pending, so it was still verified because the macOS OS updates profile is hidden. It's like an internal detail of how we enforce the versions, so we don't want it to show here. So it's correct that it doesn't show as pending here. If we take a look at the database, you'll see that we now have an MDM declaration in there, which is the Fleet macOS OS updates. So this is the right one, the one we control. It's a Fleet specific DDM. You can see the type here to enforce a specific version. The values that we specified in the UI are there, 14.4.0 and 2024 10.01. So if I look at the host, the declaration is pending installation on the host. Oh, it failed. Nice. Oh, look at that. Isn't that cool? So I haven't tried that before recording the video, but you can see that it actually validates the versions. So the one that I selected is older than the current version of the OS on the VM. So let's go ahead and fix that. That's kind of neat. So I'll go back to the OS updates and set 14.4.2 and the same date. Let's go ahead with this one. So again, OS settings, nothing changed because it's all hidden. If we go to the host, the specific host, you'll see that the verify setting is only Fleet D configuration. There's nothing else showing, and that's the way we want it. That's the way it's designed. And now if I go back here, you can see again, the MDM declaration is there with the updated values, so 14.4.2. And if I look at what's pending on the host, this time, well, it actually already had the time to install, and it's verified. And you can see that it's the same declaration. So Fleet macOS updates, and the declaration UUID matches, the 8B9 matches exactly the one that we had here. So this is all perfect. And now if I go on the host itself, so that's my macOS VM, and I look at this this file here, software update DDM, it's really just a hack to see that it actually was delivered on the host. So it's the plist, it's a binary plist, so it's not super neat looking at it like that, but you can see our values in there. So target OS version 14.4.2, target local date time, which is what we send for the deadline, 2024 10:01, and we always set it at 12, well, at noon. So that's by design, that's how it's spec'd. So there you go.
All right, and then I know everybody wanted to see the pop-up notification of, your Mac is now ready to update with the latest not nudge, Mac native. I didn't have time to set it up locally before the demo today, but if we wanted to, I can always set workstations to 14.4.1, and anybody can raise their hand if we get a pop-up notification. But I'll refrain from that. Just joking. All right, moving on, we've got Roberto with some updates.
Hey, sharing my screen now. Hoping everyone can see my screen. Yeah, I have to demo 3 things. The first one is that starting this version, we are going to sign MDM profiles that we send to devices. So if I go to a device in my VM and double click on it, I will see that it's green and verified instead of a red scary unverified. Sorry about my dog in the background. And this two notes about this. There is no nothing is required from the IT admin. This will happen automatically in the background. And we are not going to retroactively sign profiles that were already delivered. And this is going to be documented. But yeah, any new profiles you install from now on will be verified. As a side effect of that, we will be sending a new profile by default, which is a Fleet Root Certificate Authority. It's a self-signed certificate we are going to use to sign all the profiles. So this is just to make it so it doesn't require any IT admin configuration. I can go and upload a new profile and show you end-to-end if you want to, but I already have a couple profiles here just for the sake of saving some time. Yeah, so that's it for the signing feature. Let me see. We also, yeah, the other one is starting this release as soon as we merge this PR that is here. We are going to sign the fleetctl binary as part of the release process. It will happen automatically in CI. So yeah, sign and notarize. So that's good. This used to happen manually. Zach used to go and sign each one after each release, but sometimes we'll miss it, and it's just so nice to have it automatically done for ourselves. And the last thing I want to show you is kind of a side quest where we did with Dave Herder and Robert Fairbaum for a prospect that we tested a migration from microMDM to Fleet without any user interaction required. This is how it looks like, and it's nothing special except for the fact that this host was originally enrolled into microMDM. So we built a script that is a proof of concept right now, but it extracts everything from an microMDM DB, the certificates, and also generates a DB dump with all the hosts information. So you run that, you import your DB, you configure Fleet with those certificates, and then you do DNS. You point the DNS to Fleet, and things will just work. We just deliver a few profiles. We're able to send commands and so forth. So yeah, that's it.
All right,
Sorry,
next up.
I lied.
Sorry,
Those are my new favorite features. I lied. The other ones are not my favorite anymore. These are my favorite now.
That's what we're hoping for. Always your new favorite features. Exactly. All right, and Sarah will be demoing that we can now resend configuration profiles.
All right, yeah, now for Brock's next favorite feature. Let's take a look. Okay, so we're all familiar with our profiles and profile verification. Every once in a while, a profile fails, or we may want to resend a profile. Often this might be the case for, say, end user customer wants to redeploy SCEP certificates or the like. In this case, Luke's been very good. All his profiles are verified. But if there was a failed one, you could resend that too. But we'll just resend the turn off ad tracking. And watch that go. Oh, there it is, enforcing pending. And so that's going to be delivered to Luke. If we look at our dashboard, we ought to see that there's an activity to track that. And if we go back to Luke's device, well, actually, I don't want to because it'll reveal his private IP address. So that's that. Back to you, George.
All righty. Thank you so much. And that's it for MDM.
Awesome. Thank you, MDM. As always, exciting features. Couple really big ones with DDM. Signing profiles, I know, has been on a wish list for a lot of folks for a long time. So really excited about that one as well and everything that's coming out. Back over to Endpoint Ops for improvements and bug fixes.
Thank you. Really awesome, MDM. And back to Rachel for bug fixes.
Great. Hey, everybody. Sorry, I just get my computer back into a good state. Let's just go over some quick bug fixes. I know these meetings run really long if we go through everything. Cleaned up a little bit of styling on this activity, post details activity. So this is Noah's thing. I'm not going to scroll up because it has his IP address, but this is all cleaned up. One thing that we've been struggling with on the front end, and we're really trying to clean up shop, is making sure that our URL is a source of truth for every page. And that not only helps with bookmarkability, but it's been helping with this never-ending effort to make sure that our teams is always being on the correct team, no matter what page we're going on to. And I know the design team is going to be implementing some new teams header stuff, which won't look like a new change, but it will feel like a new change, especially when you're coding. So one of the bugs that we recently had was that the team context was not persisting. So I'm just going to show you guys what it looked like before, and you'll see that it's changed. So basically, when we go to a specific team and we create a new query and we live query, all of a sudden it would go to a different team. So here I am on queries on dog food. If I go to team workstations, for example, and I want to add a new query, you'll now see that we have team ID just persisting up here no matter what. So if we go to live query, I'm going to just live query this on everybody, and I stop and I cancel. You can still see we're still on the same team. And when we save this, we want this to be on that team. I can't remember what it was. Workstations, right? Workstations. And so this is the bug fix now. If we go back to queries, you should see that be on workstations. Before, it was sending it back to all teams, which was a pretty bad bug. And while doing that, I was thinking about, well, what are some other things that we've done about keeping the whole state in our bookmarkability. And one thing that we did was, if you have any search and stuff, we've already implemented this. And if you click on something with a search or a platform drop down, etc., and you click back to queries, you should still have that filter saved, which was an amazing improvement. But I thought, well, if we're not keeping teams in this weird flow, what if we did some funky weird flow here? So say I go back to host now, and I wanted to query a host. Oh, man. Okay, sorry to whoever read for now. And I'm gonna click on, oh, he's not even online, of course. Okay. Online host. All right, Anthony. And then I go to query, and then you go to create your own query. And I go back to queries. Well, I'm on workstations right now, but if I was on, sorry, let me do this flow all over again. This is the demo. issues. So I have this, and if I go back, I should be able to see the workstations one. Now I'm not change my team to all teams. So now I expect to be on all teams. And if I go to Anthony and I go to query and I create a new query and I click back to queries, now I should be back to all teams. So before it was keeping that old state because I clicked the back to query button. It was like, oh yeah, I have the queries page saved as something. So we'll go to that page. But now it's being reset. The moment you reset the team, all of those bookmarkability stuff is now reset. Let's see, other bugs, schema button location. With all refactors, there comes bugs, unfortunately. So when we added some refactors to some of our form headers, so for like query example, this show schema button actually got moved and we didn't catch it because the only way to see that button is by closing this little side panel. So now that is now fixed. That unreleased or released bug is now fixed. This is another bug. I think Zach was the one who found it on the, what do you call this? The marketing site. For example, Secure Boot was hiding a bunch of columns that was showing up on OS query. And so now on the website, we have this whole thing that says not returned in a query for selecting all from this table. And the front end now has the exact same information. So if you go to Secure Boot on this side panel, you'll see, you hover over, you'll see some of these columns will give you that same messaging. So that is now a new bug fix. And then, oh yeah, this one was a weird one that I feel really bad. Basically, if you go to, I'll just go to one of my VMs instead of sharing someone's personal information. Fake VMs, obviously. If we go here, these tooltips are now nice and cleaned up with some refactoring that we did with the whole data set stuff. Some of these tooltips were being cut off. So now you can see all of the information on the tooltips. So bear with us as we are doing a lot of refactor to not only improve the dev experience, but the UX. And then some things do end up getting through. Like we had a P2 bug ended up getting through last release and nobody caught it until after the release. And, you know, these are just things that happen when we are refactoring and hopefully, you know, adding more engineers into that QA process, especially while we're down an QA engineer, will help catch these things before release.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Next, we have Victor with a list of things, some improvements and bug fixes to the calendar feature we released last sprint, and some vulnerability bugs and others. Take it, Victor.
Thank you, Sharon. So we released the calendar feature last sprint, and so this time we found some bugs and fixed some additional bugs. So I'll go over those. So first is rate limiting. So we realized that some webhook vendors, such as Tines, which is pretty popular, have a rate limit. So we realized that customers may hit this rate limit, and so we wanted to make sure we can handle it. So we added some retry code for our webhooks because our webhooks, we could be firing like 20,000 webhooks in a few minutes, and so now we retry those webhooks. But as we were testing this, we realized that there is another limit, specifically with Tines, is if a free account is used, it actually has a daily limit of about 5,000 events. So that's just FYI to be aware of. And instead of a 429, you get a 400 code if you hit that daily limit for free accounts. So that's just something aware of. If customers are trying to use a free account with Tines, it has it's pretty limited in the number of events it can support. Okay, moving on. Another thing we found was that during dog food, we put a policy with an invalid SQL. So let me demonstrate. So we put in a policy for where's that policy? Check of latest version. And because we were using the GitOps flow, and GitOps flow doesn't validate SQL, and SQL validation is actually going into Feature Fest in general, because there was another bug related to SQL validation. So this is just basically second time during the sprint we hit a SQL validation issue. So in this case, basically with YAML processing, this like new line was missing, like, and so the bug was that with invalid SQL, the calendar logic was seeing this policy as failing, so it created an event. So in my case, I have a host here. I have an event that got created, downtime on May 21st. Let's see my hosts. I put in a failing policy, and I also have the other policy. We can see them here. Calendar events, failing policy, and check the latest version. And check the latest version was that policy with invalid SQL. So I've removed failing policy from this list and save. And then I trigger the calendar logic. I still have the invalid policy, but now that calendar event that was here was removed. So it's no longer triggering a calendar event if the policy SQL isn't. Okay, well, moving on to the third one. We also in GitOps, we were applying, Joanne and JD were applying calendar to dog food, and we had this issue. Basically, it's a validation issue. They were doing a dry run on a team enabling a calendar, but they didn't have the global integration, like the API key set. So this is just a case that we needed to catch in dry run, realizing that when people are doing a dry run, they should not be relying on global settings, because those settings may be overwritten on a subsequent run, on the actual run. So this was fixed. So now applying calendar settings via GitOps flow should be working on the initial apply. Another bug I failed, server panic. Basically, we were fixing some bugs at the end of last sprint, and one of those bug fixes introduced an issue where if you enabled calendar, I'll bring up the bug just so we have. If you enable calendar, the calendar scheduled an event, and then you went into the global settings and removed the API key and everything, the event is still there. So the server would try to look up that event, and it would cause a server panic. So it's actually a pretty big issue if customers were to encounter it. So that bug is fixed. So that's all for the calendar bugs. So moving on to some vulnerability stuff. So beginning of the sprint, I thought there'd be a picture here. Okay. We had a bunch of software vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities in the dependencies we're using in our Go dependencies and our JavaScript dependencies. So I went through those. There was about 8 issues, something like that. So I went and either waived them, update dependencies, updated the inner dependencies, or in some cases removed those dependencies. We also have now an engineering initiated story to keep our dependencies up to date, because besides vulnerabilities, just keeping our dependencies up to date is also useful for other potential bug fixes and performance issues and things like that. One thing I wanted to point out for a JavaScript dependency specifically is in the package.json file, I added this resolutions block here, and this is a way to basically overwrite inner dependencies. So we're not using like CSS node extract directly, but some of our other packages that we depend on are using it. And this dependency has a vulnerability, so I had to bump up the major version on it. And this is a way you can do it. A couple things to keep in mind here. Unfortunately, this is not dynamic, so you kind of have to aware that it's there. Second thing I just thought of earlier today is I probably should have expanded this a bit more, so you'd have a bit more context of where it's coming from. But just to be aware, there is a block of code that could be forcing certain versions of your inner dependencies. Next, I'm moving on to an issue that one of our customers reported. And I'm specifically going to focus on the Steam client from Valve. So Steam client is a client for hosting, platform for hosting games. And their software does not give us a version that we can use. It always reports the same version. But for the vulnerabilities, if you go to vulnerabilities, they give us a date. So they basically say, okay, after this date, this is fixed. But currently, using the ways we extract the versions, we're not able to get this information. So currently, what we're doing is we're basically ignoring Steam for Windows and Mac OS. So if we wanted to add this extra logic, it would be custom logic. So let me show you. I go to software, Steam. This is okay. All teams, Steam. So we got Windows and we have Mac OS. So we are ignoring vulnerabilities on the Steam app. The Steam app, it does update itself automatically. So if you install it, it'll just keep itself updated. So there's some kind of security mitigation. But if we actually wanted to track vulnerabilities for it, we would need to do some custom logic. And some other bugs, I'm going to talk about this runtime error. We've been seeing this off and on a few times. This is in the Chrome extension. This is just a recent, well, this issue is from January. We saw this in dog food. And we saw that before, and then recently we saw it occasionally, not as often. So this issue, this is coming from the WebAssembly SQLite library that we're using, and I spent some time trying to debug this. If I spend even more time, maybe I'd be able to root cause it, or maybe I'd need to pull in the SQLite developer. But since this issue we haven't been able to reliably remove it, I put in a workaround in our next 3D Chrome release, where if we see this, we basically, drop any database processing we were doing at the time and reinitialize the database. So next time we do a read from the server, hopefully next time we do the read from the server, we'll be able to, run the query successfully. So hopefully that'll, hopefully now we will not see these, cause trouble. Because the issue with this error is once it happens, basically that fully dechrome agent is basically dead. Every query returns this. So basically I was able to make it recover. So this issue should not be a big deal anymore. Next, we had an issue with the fleet control debug DB locks not working on MySQL 8. So I updated this command. So it needed basically a different way to get the information in SQL 8 versus SQL 5. So I updated and we can run it successfully now. I'll demo that. Now run successfully. I did want to point out something about this command. So this command dblocks, it looks at global tables. And because it looks at global tables, those tables need global access permission, which by default we do not have in the development environment. I just want to show how to add. So it needs process access and it needs global select. So by default, our development account does not have those in a local development environment. So if you wanted to use those, you would need to grant process and select. It's also possible that our customers may also limit the account they use to access the database account. So in order to run that command, dblocks, and I think there's another one. If anyone remembers what it is, just do help. dblocks, and this one also db in the db status. So those commands need global select and process permissions in the database to get that information. If you don't have those, you'll get a 422 error now. But at least you're not getting it 500.
I'm sorry for being the timekeeper. We don't have a lot of time, maybe a little bit more concise.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Two more. We had a setting, current instance checks, which is effectively deprecated. And basically anything that could be done with that is now done with the disable schedule. So that current instance checks is still there, but it's an effectively alias of disable schedule, and it's been removed from the documentation. And then last one, Noah's laptop ran into this. We put in a policy for 1Password, which used this syntax. You see the double percent lines, double percentages, which means go down into every directory under there. So if you have hundreds of thousands of files, this was causing basically this query to be deny listed. So we do have in a feature fest ways to improve our policies, because this was a policy to flag these cases. But in the meantime, we kind of, instead of 2%, we're now using a single percent, which only goes down to a single level now. And this is on our dog food. Okay. Sharon, back to you.
Okay, Victor, I think we can label you a bug exterminator, specifically this sprint. Thank you, Victor. Next and last we have Jacob. And Jacob, please, same note for the time. Thank you.
In short, this should not be a 500. This should be a 400. So updated that endpoint to return that. So if we hit it with note the empty JSON body there at the end, we get a bad request, which is what it is. It's not forbidden. And next, let's see. So you may remember that I did some work trimming query parameters a couple sprints back, which led to writing a bunch of integration tests across the entire API, which thankfully led to the discovery of a few bugs, including these three, which involved issues parsing the query parameters. So I know this must be pretty small. If you can see in this screenshot, there's white space, there's leading and trailing white space in this anti-query param. And you see we're successfully getting the 4 policies with that match that query, but if you notice, the count is 0. So the count endpoint was not successfully correctly parsing that query param. And just to keep things short here, since we're low on time, that's fixed. And what next do we have? We had another bug where basically when there's a mismatch, I'm just gonna describe it. When there's a mismatch between OS query blocks IDs due to some timing issue, there was Fleet was returning a 500. Again, that should have been 400. So another change there. And then we had a critical UI bug. And so whoever's editing this video, maybe if you want to remove this from the public version, here's your flag for that. So we are on, 4.48. And this was only in the wild for a very short time because we caught it immediately after it was released, but critical nonetheless. So let's see. Yeah, we were displaying the string val here in the host specific query reports instead of what we want, which is the value of val, obviously. And that was a quick fix, but to make sure we don't have anything like this happen again, we are prioritizing high impact tests around data tables rendering dynamic data like this. So that should never happen again. That's the goal. And then lastly, we had a bug with fleetd Chrome. So here, this is the bug. So this was a query select one that targeted a Chrome OS host, actually a simulated host here. It's actually my Chrome browser here. And we see that instead of seeing 1, we have no response. And this has to do with typing of the fleetd Chrome tables. We actually handled this. So when the results were coming from a table, so if we did select one from select star from privacy preferences, and one of those values was a number, we solved this bug previously by casting those numbers to strings at the table level, but that actually didn't cover this case where the number is coming from the query itself and not from a table. So the fix here was just to do that casting at one level higher so that every single result was cast to string. And let's see, are we on main yet? We are. So if we rebuild the extension, and load it. Let's make sure the old one is gone. And now let's try that same query again. It gives us 1. So that's that bug. And further work on migrating the NVD tools repo into Fleet, but that's I'll demo that next sprint. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Jacob. And that concludes the titanium element for Endpoint Ops team. Back to you, Luke.
Awesome. Thank you, Endpoint Ops. Over to MDM for improvements and bug fixes. The lightning round. Y'all have 11 minutes left.
I was about to say we've got 11 minutes for 10 tickets, so I'm just going to jump ahead and do a lightning round here for what Martin did this sprint. We had 3 bugs, but specifically this one was a critical bug. There was a failure to catch a correlation explicitly in the database migration. So users that had a non-default correlation set, we had to add a fix into the migration so that they could upgrade. There was a workaround where if they apply the Unicode collation that we support, they could update, but still Martin turned it around and got the migration updated pretty quickly. This is a critical patch. Second critical patch that we had this sprint was I found that if you had any DDM profiles set during DEP, the host would never release and the end user would be stuck waiting on the IT admin. And we also learned that this only explicitly hits macOS before 14.1. So I was on 14.0 and DDM kind of hits this weird dead loop. So the fix here was if the host is being enrolled through DEP, we do not send the DDM profiles currently. And that lets them go through the release process as expected. And then lastly was a update where currently the bug says you have the same name if you uploaded a second profile with an identical payload identifier. This is just being more clear about where the conflict is so that the end user can resolve it, or sorry, the IT admin can resolve it more accurately. All right, moving on to Dante.
All right, just let me share my screen here really quick. I only really have 2 bugs I'm showcasing here, so it should be rather quick. The first was an issue where it would be impossible to determine if BitLocker was enabled on your computer if you match a certain criteria, because on Windows 11 Pro, BitLocker is always installed, so you can query whether or not it's enabled on a certain drive. But for certain versions of Windows, like Windows Server and Windows, I think, Home Edition, what would happen is that if you tried to use OS Query to query whether or not BitLocker is enabled on a drive, it would just crash and the query would never return. So there would just be null columns in the database and it wouldn't be true or false. So what we do now is instead of just querying that directly, we first check if it's an optional feature in Windows and if it's enabled, or if it's not an optional feature, which means that BitLocker is definitely present, and then we query it. So that was a big one. And that also led to a cascading effect where there was another issue in the UI where host details wouldn't be returned because the column would be null. And another one, which was also a bit of an interesting Windows deep dive, was Windows return codes. So we would have issues where scripts would get stuck in the upcoming section of the UI for a long time, and they would never run. And the reason would be that the script would run, and we're expecting that if a script is killed or has a certain type of failure, it will return -1 because that's what PowerShell or the Windows command interpreter returns. But what is in fact the case is that Windows only returns unsigned integers instead of signed integers. And we made our database columns signed 32-bit integer. So what would happen is we're expecting a -1 with this representation, but Windows would return this, which is the same bit representation. But since it was an unsigned integer instead of a signed one, it would be too big for the database column. The column would never be able to commit because the number was too big, and the script would get stuck at upcoming. So what ended up happening is instead we just cast the unsigned integer into a signed integer, which would then display as a -1 instead of this giant number, and it's able to fit in the database column, and it matches what CMD and PowerShell return as an exit status. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dante. Now on to Gabe.
Recording stopped.
Okay, sorry, just sharing my screen. This one will be really quick. So there was a bug, just that this
Recording in progress.
status right here was going onto 2 lines, which just kind of looks a bit, doesn't look great. So yeah, I was just fixing that. So making sure that all of these stay on 1 line and they truncate when needed. And yeah, just a little UI polish. That's it.
All right, next up we've got Roberto with another one.
Yeah, mine is also really quick. This mostly has to do with maturity in regards to how we interpret DEP assignments and when we assign the DEP profile, which is a JSON file. So now during migration, before we trigger the MDM migration, we're making sure all the things are in the right places, which will prevent errors on the user's devices.
Awesome. And lastly, we've got 2 for Sarah. You got 5 minutes.
All right, I will. I'll do them in 17 syllables a piece. There you go.
I will say that one for the built-in labels is one that we definitely wanted to make sure made it in, because with the ability to update manual labels, before you have the ability to accidentally clobber the built-in labels that we use to determine which platform shows up in your UI, and now you are restricted, so you cannot override the built-in labels that we're currently using. So that one on the right is very, very good, helping people not shoot themselves in the foot. All right, does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I guess that's it for MDM. Thank you so much. Back to you, Luke.
Great work, MDM. Thank you. And speaking of haikus, we published an article about the haiku integration in GitHub. And without realizing it, it was published on National Haiku Poetry Day, which was a total coincidence. So how's that for coincidence? As we said, all of this is in dog food. Today's a really good day to get in there and mess around. And if you spot anything, please let us know. If you do, it's likely an unreleased bug that we want to jump on before we publish the release on Monday. Any final parting words of wisdom or questions before we wrap?
Can I just ask one real quick question? I hope it's a big topic, but so Victor brought up this Steam thing, and Tim and I were looking at the Firefox ESR version to get vulnerability. So it seems like, we're kind of drilling down into edge cases for finding vulnerabilities for things that are harder to detect or harder to collect the version of. And I'm just wondering, like, what's the, other than, covering off on each edge case we find, what's the strategy for trying to be more comprehensive about those or proactive about those kind of things? Is there a way to do that anybody knows of or can think of, or is it too hard to even think about that?
Anyone have thoughts?
You can
Okay,
scour Reddit for super niche.
It's a hard problem.
It's a hard
Sounds
problem.
like it's too hard to talk about is the answer. No,
We
maybe
should ask that question. Oh, sorry, Luke.
I was just gonna say a Slack thread might make sense, and then we can kind of think about it and follow up async there.
Yeah, get everyone in your family enrolled in our fleet. So we
Right.
have more.
That's one of the best ways. When I worked in fintech, to find bugs, we would just get all of our friends and family to enroll their accounts in our software, because really you just need that kind of live, out in the wild data to find a lot of these edge cases. So that's one way is set up a fleet instance for your family to use and start rolling them there. And Actually, that'll be easier to do soon, because we're prioritizing a Terraform deployment that it's optimized for speed to a platform as a service like Heroku or Render. So very soon it'll be a lot easier for anyone on this call to quickly stand up their own fleet instance if they want to do something like that.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep. I also think it's pretty valid to go with kind of an 80-20 rule. If we tried to find everything, we would never release anything, because there are just that many, dynamics and rabbit holes that we could probably go down. So I think making sure that we at least cover 80% of our expected customer use cases is probably pretty valuable.
Yeah, great perspective. All right, thanks, y'all. Have a good weekend. Have a good rest of your Friday, and I'll talk to you soon.